Welcome to the Church Podcast, talking all things ministry so you can do church better. I'm your host, Christopher Wesley, and I'm really excited about today's guest because we're going to be jumping into a world we haven't yet, and that's the technological world. And I know when you hear tech, you might be like cringing or getting shivers down your spine. Don't worry. This is supposed to help you with all of that. So today's guest is Jonathan Lewis, and I've known Jonathan for a couple of years, first through the Archdiocese of Washington, where he was doing work with young adults down there. And now he works with CFT, which stands for Catholic Faith Technologies. What does Catholic Faith Technologies do? Well, basically, they focus on the transformative impact of software on engagement within the Catholic Church. And so what Jonathan does specifically is he helps parishes and dioceses figure out how they can leverage technology to foster deeper community involvement and faith practices. And so they offer training courses and different modules that can either help you in your specific ministry, or if you're in the diocese, your entire diocese or your organization. And so they do a lot of great, important stuff, especially with bringing the Catholic Church into the technological world. So before you get all geeked out or fearful of it, you definitely want to check out this episode. And after you watch this episode, if you love it, if you hate it, if you don't like it, that's okay. Just leave us a review anywhere podcasts can be heard. We'd love to hear your feedback. Anyway, without any further delay, here's my guest, Jonathan.
Okay.
Jonathan, welcome to the Church Podcast. How you doing, my friend?
Good, man. Thanks, Chris.
I'm so glad to have you on the show. We've known each other for a couple of years now in different capacities and everything like that. But for people who are not familiar with you, or maybe they're familiar with previous roles that you've had, can you tell people a little bit about your journey and your role at Catholic Faith Technologies?
Yeah, thanks. And grateful to be on the pod. From Northeast Kansas, grew up in the Kansas City area, went to college at Catholic U and then grad school at the ECHO program at Notre Dame. And during that time, worked in parishes in the Diocese of Wilmington, and then moved to San Francisco, worked at parishes in the Archdiocese of San Francisco, while also getting involved at the diocesan level there, and got my sort of interest piqued at this idea of being able to serve a wider group of people at a diocesan level. And so was able to move back to DC to work at the Archdiocese of Washington for 9 years. At the end was serving as the assistant secretary, kind of working with a handful of the offices that do pastoral ministry in the Archdiocese of Washington. And then a buddy of mine said, "Hey, we have a VP role at Catholic Faith Technologies," and the Archdiocese had worked with CFT in the past, so I was familiar with them. I was sort of like a bit of a convert. I was like, I don't do technology. I'm a relational ministry person. Like, that's my background. That's what I believe in. And was sort of a convert to realize, oh, this is actually a key that opens that doorway wider for people and for churches and dioceses. So I've been in the role about 2.5 years, and it's been exciting. We work with about 50 national organizations, dioceses, hundreds and hundreds of churches with our religious ed curriculum with Loyola Press and Ignatius Press. It's been really, really fun to learn more and to be challenged in the technology space and to learn more about kind of the formation space in this country.
Well, all right. I know we've got some questions we want to tackle, but I love how you talked about being a convert, right? So let's dig a little bit more into that. Not necessarily you, but what do you feel like are some of the challenges or adverse feelings that people have when it comes to technology? You said, like, I got this in to be relational, but technology is such an important tool, obviously, or otherwise you wouldn't have switched into the technological field.
Yeah. I mean, I think so many of us grew up through that hand-to-hand, face-to-face ministry, especially when there weren't as many technology tools available because we're old and have gray in our beards. And so I think that's the foundation point that people have for what ministry should look like. I think when people dig deeper, they realize, oh, the goal of evangelization is to meet people where they're at, and we have these digital highways of where people are. Right, people are spending 7 hours a day behind a screen. So it doesn't mean we should leave people there, but it does mean we should meet people there. And then it's a question in my mind of what's the goal of what we're trying to accomplish, and can technology help us do that? Right, no one balks at sending emails to parents.
Right.
or to catechists, but that's technology helping us do something that before we'd have the phone call trees, right? And so I think if we kind of break it down, it is helpful to be like, oh, there's ways in which we can reduce friction, increase accessibility in the work that we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the phone call trees. I was just at a conference and I was talking to a couple of younger youth ministers, and phone call tree came up, and I was like, "Do you guys even know what that was?" And I had them guess, and that's just a whole nother conversation for another time. But it also reminds me, you said like no one balks at emails being sent to their catechists or parents. This shows just how long I've been in ministry, right? I remember early on in ministry when parents would get upset that we were sending emails instead of just handing flyers to their kids to take home and everything. And it's just kind of like, I mean, people still hate when we just send emails, but it's
Sure.
like, it's a whole different thing there. But
Yeah.
it's interesting because we tell people not to spend their time stuck behind their desks, right?
Yeah.
Like if you work in a parish, if you work in the diocese, it's about being out with the people. Pope Francis tells us to smell like the sheep and everything like that. But
Yeah.
I love what you said about meeting people in technology, not necessarily leading them there. Can you talk a little bit more about like what that looks like, and maybe at a parish level too?
Yeah. I mean, I think the reality, if we're being honest, the challenge is that we don't have too many ministry leaders, staff,
Mm,
full time, part time, or volunteers. And we don't have too many hours a day to walk with people
right.
because of the busyness of our lives, right? My wife and I always joke that it just seems like there's more decisions to make today than there were 10 or 20 years ago, right?
Mm,
Even like it's easier for me to buy something on Amazon, but now I got a pile in the corner of my dining room of returns I have to make. Or it's, decision paralysis of like, which of these 10 whatevers do I want to buy and trying to do research on the thing as opposed to just going to the store and buying the one or two options you have. And
right.
so I think people are just overtaxed. I mean, in family life, people are talking about mental load, the reality of unacknowledged work and labor in families. I think there's a lot of mental load in churches as well, and identifying who's carrying that responsibility. But one of the downstream consequences of that busyness is that people get lost.
Right.
And so I remember when I was working in the Archdiocese of Washington in young adult ministry, and I, some one time a parochial vicar said to me, "Oh, we don't have young adults in my parish." I was like, "Okay." And I had done a little bit of the demographic research to be like, "Well,
Mm,
that's interesting, Father. Like, I realize there probably aren't a lot engaged right now. It's interesting because 30% of everyone in this county are in their 20s and 30s. So I'm curious, like, where they are." And one of the
yeah.
exercises I tried to help do with parishes is to ask the question like, hey, who got baptized? Who are the
Mm,
parents that got baptized in the last 5 years? Who are the couples that got married in your church in the last 5 years? Do you have confirmation lists that go back 5 years or more? Like, if you go back 4 or 5 years, those are young adults, right?
mm,
Now, the challenge is we don't know who they are or where they are because we don't have the right tools to actually do what in the business world people would call effective data management. That feels scary in ministry land, but it's data for the sake of accompaniment, right?
mm,
Because we don't keep good, tracking. The DRE has her Excel list of her catechists, and the youth minister has a Google sheet of his youth ministry leaders, and the parish secretary is using whatever parish management system doesn't connect to any of those things, and so we lose people. I mean, I think that's what was really the light bulb moment for me is that as a church we're losing the ability to accompany people because we don't know who they are.
and I think that came to the forefront, especially during the pandemic, right? Because I know our parish, amongst many other parishes, the effort was okay. Let's start calling out to people, reach
Yeah,
out to people, check in on them, which was such a valiant effort. But I can't speak for other parishes. I know for us, it was a glaring elephant that we had such bad data.
yeah,
Because we're calling people and they're like, "Oh yeah, I moved to name that
right.
city," or yeah, no, we go to another parish now, and
Mhm.
and granted, we were in the midst of onboarding a new database system at our parish,
Yeah.
but I liked how you pointed out, right? Like the church secretary has an Excel spreadsheet, the youth minister has Google Sheets, and it's coming up with that universal data point where we can find some of those find the right information.
Yeah, and technology is not the silver bullet here, but you know but if you're gardening, tools like shovels help, right?
Hmm.
Like We
Yeah.
need good tools to help us do the things we want to do.
Yeah.
So pick your tool. Another great tool could be a parish staff sitting together once a week and reviewing the names of new families, of those who haven't given in the last 3 months, and really being really intentional about focusing on the names of people.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen right in parishes, and so sometimes technology can help make that process quicker or easier to run those kind of reports, or even to know, when we talk about disaffiliation, like there's names behind those numbers. And I think, in my mind, the shift we have to make is from numbers to names and from programs to people. And so during COVID, we got so happy live streaming mass and saying 300 people watched our mass. It's like, okay, but who?
Mhm.
And I think the pendulum swung happily from totally digital back to in person. And then I think it's also happily swinging back to some middle space
Yeah.
of recognizing, oh, there's a good in something digital and there's a good in the in person. We have to have better discernment to identify who's our audience, what are the goals of this moment, and is that better done in person or online, right? A retreat is better done in person, unless you're a parent who's got a bunch of kids and you can't join a whole day long retreat, right?
Hmm.
Or you're a part time worker holding multiple jobs and you can't possibly get away on a Saturday or a Sunday, which is why ministries have done like a busy person's retreat. So I'm
Right.
talking with one ministry about, hey, what if you did like an hour of on demand retreat content with a daily like office hours retreat spiritual direction check in? Like there's just flexible ways in which we can meet people where they're at, because
Mhm.
I think people have expected a level of access during COVID that responds to the needs of their family life, their personal life, to actually be effective.
Yeah. So I know we're like kind of jumping all over the place when it comes to technology, right? Because that's the other part of it, right? When we talk about church and technology, we're talking about database systems, we're talking about live streaming, we're talking about just a whole array of different things.
Yeah.
Um, but let's narrow it down to some of the things that Catholic faith technology like offers. So what are some of the solutions that you guys offer with parishes, and if there's any like wins, or well, I'm sure there's plenty of wins, but
Yeah.
if you know of any like kind of personal testimonies of like where you saw software solutions equip parishes in living out the mission that God's given them.
Yeah. So Catholic Faith Technologies is partnered with the company Fax Management, and offers a lot of technology software solutions for parishes, schools, and dioceses. The one I'll flag is our Learning Content Management System, LCMS, or some people say LMS. It's the online learning platform, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so we do a lot of different things with that, which is kind of cool. So we've for 10 years have worked with Ignatius Press in publishing the online faith and life first through eighth grade curriculum. We're updating that this year, which is going to be amazing. And so parishes that are doing like a family catechesis program where they're not sitting kids behind a classroom desk every week, flipping a textbook, then throwing those textbooks out, ordering new ones the next year and doing the same thing. They're saying, hey, what if we put a little bit more opportunity on parents, to learn with their kids at home, so that we're forming parents alongside kids. And then when we get people in person, let's use that time really effectively and do whole family conversations, prayer, discussion. So that's a great use case of using technology to do something that otherwise, people would struggle to do. Giving a parent just a textbook and saying, "Hey, you lead," is overwhelming.
Right.
But saying, "Hey, we have an online course that's gonna guide you through it. Um, pay attention, help out your kid. They can do some self guide as they're older, of course, but it just opens up that opportunity."
Well, and I think that's so key because I remember taking my sons through their first communion several years ago, and you had the workbook, but you also had a DVD. This goes back a DVD, but also there was a digital download. But you know,
What year are we in, Chris?
I'm not gonna throw the organization under the bus, or even age myself in this, but it was one of those things where we were able to download it to the iPad, watch it with
Yeah,
our sons, and it was that shared experience in that regards, right?
yeah,
And and I think it's important for us, like, yeah, as a parent, and I'm sure you feel the same way, right? We don't want our kids stuck behind screens, but we also understand that so much learning is done with technology and media and screens, and I know there's been lots of debates around that, but yeah, having learning module system for parents, especially for family catechesis, I can see being truly rewarding for sure.
Yeah. And what's great, some critiques I hear from diocesan leaders is, well, how do we know parents are doing it? Right? There's a bit of distrust there, but there's a bit of honesty of, we know parents don't feel equipped. So how can we trust with confidence that they are equipped to do that? The benefit of having it online is it's tracked. So a DRE or a pastor can see, the Wesleys only spent 15 minutes on this training that was supposed to be 45 or an hour. Let me just follow up and see how they're doing, right? It opens up doorways for conversations. Or a family spent 2 hours, like, wow, I want to dig in, like, what did you think? What did you get out of that, right? Again, technology is not the end of that conversation, but can be a launching pad for wider accompaniment.
But see, that's the key, like you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
It's because I know from my own personal experience and talking to other people, right? It's like, all right, I've signed up for the technology. It goes back to your comment of like not being the silver bullet. Like, great, I'm going to be able to track all this stuff, but it's actually digging into the numbers and seeing that the numbers have names and have stories. So what are some like points of advice that in your experience in ministry and with Catholic faith technologies would encourage like parishes to do to, not get consumed with the numbers, but really kind of dig into them and follow up? I mean, you mentioned the meeting before, but what if we don't have time for another meeting where we're just really one person? Like, what can we do?
Yeah, obviously it depends so widely on what that ministry is and who you're trying to reach, right? It's different if you're working with teens than if you're doing catechist formation for 50 catechists at a parish. But I do think I was reading through the directory for the updated directory for catechesis yesterday and working on a talk, and the document really prioritizes a style of accompaniment in everything we're doing. Pope Francis has been repetitive in this, right? We must initiate everyone, priests, clergy, religious, and laity, into this art of accompaniment, which helps us to remove our sandals, the sacred ground of the other. I think that's the spirit that we need to approach everything we're doing. And so again, I've really been formed by identifying who's your audience, what do you want them to learn, believe, experience, and then what's the best way to help them get there, knowing that you're in this style or art of accompaniment. And so my hope of using technology is that you can offload from a local parish leader who doesn't have too few jobs, right? They're probably a slasher that has 4 or 5 job responsibilities at a parish, offload certain tasks so that they can spend their time doing the things that only they can do. So if you have a deacon or a DRE or pastor teaching baptism prep to a couple, maybe you get an hour with exhausted parents who have a 3-month-old or 6-month-old, and you're teaching them what? You have an hour. What are you doing? Well, people are reading a book and pamphlet. They're teaching about priest, prophet, king. They're teaching about original sin. They're teaching that you should be the primary formators of your children. And people just feel talked at. As opposed to, let's find someone who's dynamic and engaging, like a Chris Wesley or other speakers, to teach people about baptism so that a couple can engage that at their SNAP schedule with their newborn. And then when they get in person, you're saying, hey, how's your family doing? Do you guys need any meals? How would you like to get involved in the parish? Do you need any babysitters? I'd love to connect you to some of the teens in our, you can do that whole formation, that whole person formation, not because you've ignored the intellectual formation, but you've offloaded it to an online, more accessible way for them to engage it. I know last year my wife and I did this like on-demand course for couples communication. It was awesome. We only could do that because we put our kids to bed, and like once a week at 8 or 8:30 p.m. we went through it, the two of us. Yeah. If that was a class that the parish offered, 0% I would have been able to go. Certainly not both of us, right? But because it was accessible to us on demand, it was formative.
But then again, there also needs to be the follow-up, right? Because it's like you're not, I'm assuming you're not advocating that like, hey, do this technology, then they never have to come into the parish, right? Because we also want to have that relational aspect. But I could be like, well, I know Jonathan and his wife watched this couple's video as the director of adult faith formation. Let me follow up with them and see if they're going to come to our retreat, or just want to check in that regard.
Yeah, exactly. That would be the ideal, is that you have that blend. And then, again, you're prioritizing. Really, my hope is we can change the job description of what pastor leaders are doing
Mm-hmm.
to prioritize accompaniment.
Yeah.
And I think we need different tools and to shift things off of that job description to be able to help people spend that hour or 2 hours with different people over the course of their week.
Hey everyone, just wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors. One of the questions that I get a lot is what are some of the most important resources you could have in ministry? Well, number one is prayer, right? Prayer is essential. Can't overstate that. Second are volunteers. Without volunteers, you're stuck doing it alone. But if there was a third one, I'd have to say it's what you wear, your t-shirts, right? Yeah, you don't have to be in youth ministry to wear really cool graphic Catholic t-shirts. You can be in any ministry, and thank God for organizations like Sacrilegious, where they not only supply you really cool t-shirts, but mugs, socks, things for babies, stickers, all sorts of cool things that will not only make you look awesome, but make you feel holier. And so we'd love to, again, send you to sacrilegious.com to check out all their awesome gear. Click on the show notes below and not only start feeling holier, but look holier too. It's the third most important resource according to this advertisement. All right, back to the show. I want to pivot a little bit because we're talking a lot about formation and accompaniment of parents and teens and everything like that. But one thing I know you and I have talked about is how what you guys are doing and just LMSs in general can be used for training of our catechists or small group leaders or staff, even like onboarding, right? And so let's talk a little bit about that in that regard. So and I know this sounds like a sell for Catholic Faith Technologies, which I know you won't oppose, but like if my parish is a part of that, that's something that I can use to train my catechists, right, and to bring them on board, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got a catalog of online courses, and one thing I love about CFT is we take a partnership first approach, as we've talked about together in the past. That we're not producing videos in house of me or any of us. We're looking at the landscape and saying, hey, if we're forming catechists in how to engage apologetics or tough questions or foundational ministry, who are the best people in the country doing that work? Let's partner with them to help produce content or courses or trainings, whether it's live or on demand. And then parishes and dioceses can tap into that. And so really it's almost a very synodal experience of formation that we can connect people to the breadth of good leaders in the life of the church. We're not beholden to one publisher or one person or Catholic celebrity, right? We want the breadth of the experience in the church. And part of that, Chris, is because I really believe that formation has a local character, needs to have a local character, right? That's that style of accompaniment. And I think one of the challenges that we probably need to swing back the pendulum a little bit from is to not only prioritize sort of celebrity and popular leaders nationally, but to really help them then to connect locally. So if we're teaching someone about how to engage people who identify as gay, that conversation is going to look different if you're in Texas than if you're in New York City, right? And if we only are speaking to a national audience, we lose the ability to give context or enculturate the how we are going to communicate the truth of the church that's consistent to those different local communities. And so I think what's exciting to me is when we give to a diocese their own platform, they can, when we work with Brooklyn or the Richmond diocese, like they're building their own courses because they know the language of their people. And that can complement working with other national leaders and speakers as well. But we just can't lose that local character, either in our formation language, but also then in the follow-up and the accompaniment.
So let's dig into that a little bit more. Tell me, like, how can dioceses or even parishes raise up more of that local voice, that local flavor that you were mentioning, so that these tools and resources we use, yes, they highlight the universal church, but also stay local as well. So what are some best practices that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, in one end, you have a parish or diocese that says we have to create everything ourselves. And I don't think very many people have the bandwidth to do that anymore.
No.
On the other end, you have, we're just going to offload this to that university or that ministry and have them do everything, and we don't have to touch it. I think we're seeing that isn't the best model anyway, because you're losing that local flavor, right? And really the leadership of that bishop or that staff, whether the parish or diocese, to form their people and to know their people closely. So what we do is give a diocese, for example, So the Archdiocese of New York, we do marriage prep with thousands of couples there.
Mm-hmm.
So we're helping them build their own marriage prep program formation, but then also have the admin tools and process to run couples through registering, showing up to an in-person moment or a Zoom session. So it's a hybrid experience there. And also then working on how are we forming leaders? So creating an introduction to the marital catechumenate in the Archdiocese of New York. It's just for that diocese, right?
Right.
And in that marriage prep process, every couple's hearing from Cardinal Dolan, thanking them and encouraging them in their vocation in New York, where in a different diocese across the country or across the world, that local leader can do the same thing.
Yeah. So let's say I'm sold and I'm like, all right, yes, I'm not going to create my own library of video curriculum, but I do want to contribute, right? I want to contribute to my diocese or to create content. What, like, all right, I know that maybe talking for a half an hour in front of a screen camera is not the best way of doing that, but what are some of the best practices that you're seeing through the different contributors and people who are offering media to you all? What are some of the best practices that you are seeing where there's dynamic catechesis or training that's done via video?
Yeah, I would say I'd probably take out the word video there and talk about online learning, because I think that's a pivot
Okay.
in the formation space. There's a difference between a video playlist, which is good, can be good, and effective learning. If you go to a college or university, no one's just pressing video play, 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 right? Educators, I think, have learned how adults especially learn, right? Adult formation means you're asking questions and engaging the lived experience of the adult so that they're a collaborator in the formation experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's whole person formation. So you're asking, how are you forming them spiritually, intellectually, pastorally? How are you cultivating human formation in the process, right? And so I think best practices in my mind would be, for again, some of that what people call backwards design, starting with who's your audience, what are the learning objectives,
Mm-hmm.
and then how are they engaging this? There's some things that are going to be better live, whether that's in a parish hall or on a Zoom call. There's other things that can be more effective self-paced, where
Well,
people are walking through that content.
let's talk a little bit about that. How does one discern what would be better in person versus, via video? Or sorry, media learning module.
Yeah, in an online learning model.
Yeah.
It really depends session to session. I think if it's something that a person can understand
Mm-hmm.
on their own, or walk through and you can sort of scaffold people's learning and their ability to comprehend it, and maybe even include like a self-assessment or
Mm-hmm.
knowledge check so that they're getting good feedback and testing that. That's really effective. If it's something that really needs to be dialogical, if it's something that really is built on questions and answers, or people having to bring particular situations to unpack, then I think you either need to complement that on demand course with something that's live, whether it's a 15-minute phone call with a leader or a Zoom session in a group process, just to supplement that as well. But so much, we have a series of courses on the four pillars of the catechism, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
great example of something that works really well on demand that people can kind of self-pace through. Maybe someone's going to spend 20 minutes doing it. Someone might spend 2 hours going through and unpacking what the different parts of the creed mean, right? If you're talking about faith and mental health,
Mm-hmm.
you can get sort of a baseline understanding of that. But I think is for maybe more experienced leaders, they need that baseline refresher. But then they also probably need either a group or one-on-one follow-up to say, hey, I had this situation. Let's unpack that.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be something that you do in the context of a course, having some office hours or putting into a hybrid cohort, which we do. Like Villanova has a great Center for Church Management.
Mm-hmm.
We run their certificate programs that are hybrid in church management and school management. It's a great example of most of the work's done throughout the month, watching on demand, and then you get live with a presenter, but also a cohort where you can share case studies and ideas and get feedback.
Okay.
And so I really believe that the future of learning probably is going to have a lot of those hybrid elements,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's on Zoom or in person, to follow up with people.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the future, right? Technology is always changing; it's evolving. People are hearing AI and you know, um, freaking out or getting really excited or something
Yeah.
like that. What trends do you foresee in the intersection of technology and faith practices for the future? Like, in maybe not in the far distance, but like maybe some stuff that's coming up that you're either excited about or concerned about.
Yeah, things I'm excited about is that move towards hybrid and seeing the benefit of community learning in a cohort or
Mm-hmm.
including coaching work in the process of learning. Again, I think that's a great example of where you can still make use of good
Mm-hmm.
self-paced or asynchronous training, whether it's videos or a course, but then complement that with either in person or live, whether it's accountability, pastoral support, discussion from a mentor or guide.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's a real positive. I think too, people are going to get more data driven. There are some streaming platforms or, resources that just rely on sharing how many hits they got
Mm-hmm.
or how many views. And I think that's just really limiting. If our goal is to accompany people, not, and really focused on names instead of just numbers. So again, I think that shift from numbers to names means that we need to be using tools that help us drill down to the individual level and say, hey, Jonathan went through this. In his pre-assessment, he said he feels comfortable. In his post-assessment, he said, actually, I need to talk about this. Great. Now is someone teed up to actually follow up with him? And in the archdiocese, in an archdiocese that we work with, we do some teacher formation, and they have to write a paper as like a response to their formation training. And someone in the diocese, bless their heart, reads every one. A
Mm-hmm.
great example of using staff time to actually be in touch individually with people. And there was one situation with a teacher who wasn't living according to the teachings of the church and named that was someone she was struggling with. That facilitated a conversation with her pastor and someone in the diocese just to say, hey, do you want to learn more? Where are you at with this? Like, thanks so much for raising it. And it ended up being a really fruitful moment of formation and accompaniment that led to that person making different decisions and feeling energized by it, right? Um, that to me is really exciting that you can use technology to help raise questions, ideas, needs, concerns, opportunities, and then have the people who can follow up with them individually.
Well, it really is interesting to see how vulnerable people are willing to get with technology, right? I mean, I know like it doesn't replace intimacy, but the fact that people are willing to share these personal things, and I love the fact that that teacher was able to sort of name this challenge that she was struggling with. And I don't know why a thumb popped up, but there you go. Steven, my producer, will have to deal with that later. But anyway, like, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Just how it creates more of this open door, this ability for people to really like share more than maybe they would have in person. Because with the screen, there is a little bit of that anonymity, even though they have the username attached with that, and so it could be a helpful tool where people reach out for
I
sure.
think it's a great point. I mean, it's so interesting, especially younger generations feel more comfortable sharing things about their heart
Mm,
when it's mediated. I mean, I know in ministry, Chris, as you know, like when you're working with guys, you walk side by side, both
mm,
looking the same direction, right?
right.
That's sort of the is the
The
little human or pastoral
the
tip.
deep talks happen in the car, right? When you're
Yeah,
just driving. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. God forbid there be eye
Nope.
contact. Exactly. So I think, similarly with, more with younger people, but I think younger people being anyone maybe 40 plus and under, people are comfortable engaging through a screen, typing something up. It gives them kind of that breath to engage and to put it into words.
Yeah.
Um, that's not where we want people to end up, but it's a great starting place, right?
Well, and I think that's the key, right? Making using technology to be a starting place. Now,
Yeah.
as you guys grow your libraries and continue to help parishes and dioceses create these resources and ways of connection for people, how are you guys involving clergy, educators, and lay leaders in the development process of what you're doing?
Yeah, the exciting part about being kind of a partner first organization is we don't have formation content or resources without being partnered
Mm,
with ministry leaders, clergy, and religious in the country. So that's the exciting part is we get to kind of start in partnership.
yeah.
We're also very fortunate to have a great advisory board that we can kind of call on and pick people's brains about with bishops, clergy, and lay folks. So we make use of those tools. But the nice thing is in some sense, leaders decide by what they're using. And so we
Mm.
learn a lot by identifying, hey, what courses are people being drawn to? And that teaches us as well.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So what advice would you give to parishes and dioceses hesitant to integrate technology to their ministry? I know we've kind of touched upon a couple of good reasons, but like someone's like, Jonathan, this sounds great, but we're a traditional Catholic parish. We're a traditional Catholic archdiocese or diocese. Like, why really double down on technology?
I would invite a reflection on whether or not that's been fruitful in the long haul.
Hmm.
If the current model, whatever that model is helping us cultivate long-term relationships of spiritual growth and accompaniment with people.
Hmm.
And if it's not, to ask the question, what would you love to do? It's not about using technology as a starting point. It's saying, what are your goals? And then how can we help you get there? If you'd love to do more in-person small groups, if you'd love to have the time to do one-on-ones, what are things we could take off your plate or that we could make more efficient in your day to day so that you could be freed up to have that time?
Yeah.
And to also recognize people are using technology every day in ministry. They're sending email newsletters. Sometimes they're sending texts or having text groups. They're prioritizing a website. They're posting on social media. Like, I think people are already comfortable with some technology. It's a concern that maybe that it's too much. And I
Mm.
think that's where I would say, hey, what are your goals? And let's be really crystal clear on, can that be done effectively in a more scalable way? That like employee onboarding or volunteer onboarding is a great example, right?
Right.
There's probably 10 things you want to introduce a new volunteer or staff person to. They can go through that at their own pace in the first week or 2 weeks of ministry.
Mm.
That doesn't eliminate the need to have the conversation with them. It means that when you're face to face, they come ready to talk, right? It's that kind of flipped classroom model. I think you enable the conversations to go deeper and to go farther when you help people prepare and do some work on their own ahead of time.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's great advice, and something that we really need to do is continue to create these prompts, these conversation starters,
Yeah.
and technology can be a part of that. But I think one of the best takeaways from this conversation is like, what are your goals, and how does technology help you get there? Instead of following what are other people doing, let's just you know duplicate it without any thought or reason behind that. For sure.
Yeah, I think people are overwhelmed by a religious consumerism, especially in different liturgical seasons, right? How
Hmm.
many emails do you get every day? Or even just like scrolling on Instagram at night, how many times are people like, here's the hack you need to know?
Right.
If you're not using this, it's like, don't tell me the things I have to be doing, right? I think people get overwhelmed by that.
Right.
And so anything on top of that can feel overwhelming.
Mm.
And that's not what we're about. It's not saying you have to be doing this the way. It's just saying, what do you love to do? How can we help you do that? And I think just making use of technology can help us accomplish the goals we already have in ministry.
Hey, sorry. I know another ad. All right. Yep. We'll get back to the show. Trust me. But I wanted to take some time to talk about the church podcast premium subscription. That's right. We have a premium subscription where when you sign up for CP Plus, you not only get episodes earlier, you not only get away from these ads and these annoying ads and everything, but we're going to send you a free subscription to MYM Premium where you get videos and downloadable resources for you and your team so you can get better at ministry. You also will get producer credits, and there's nothing better than producer credits, right? Especially for a niche podcast like this one. So why wait for that? Also, when you sign up for CP Plus, we're going to give you 10% off your first custom t-shirt order at Four Marks Printing, one of our sponsors here at the Church Podcast. But the best part, when you sign up for CP Plus, is that 50% of your proceeds, 50% of what you give towards CP Plus each month, goes towards the Ministry Training Source, which is an organization that's focused on research for professional ministry. So even if you're not a professional minister, you're helping us figure out how we can support and build up the profession of lay ecclesial ministry. So what do you have to do? Just go to thechurchpodcast.org and scroll down and you'll see a box for the Church Podcast Plus premium subscription. And that's all you got to do. So instead of buying a third of a pizza, sign up for a monthly subscription at thechurchpodcast.org. Anyway, enough for me. Back to the show. All right. So, Jonathan, one thing we do with all of our guests is we like to ask them 5 final questions, right? And so I know I sent them to you ahead of time. Don't know if you had a chance to look them over or pray about them, but you ready to dive into the final 5?
Let's do it.
All right. Awesome. So, in addition to prayer, what is one tangible tool or resource that has helped you be your most productive self?
There's a practice that I learned a couple years ago called a clarity break,
Okay.
where once every couple of weeks or once a month, you leave kind of your workspace and you journal on a couple questions. Um, where are you spending your time? What are your short and long term goals? What do you love to do and are good at? What do you love to do but you're not good at? What do you not like to do but you're good at it? What do you not like to do and you're not good at it? And draw that kind of quadrant and then map all the things you're doing. And figure out in the things you don't love to do and aren't life giving, can you delegate those to someone else? Can you just drop them, or can you escalate them to someone else on the team
Mm.
so that you can lean into the things that are life giving and that are most important? So I think just again goal setting on a quarterly basis, certainly on an annual basis, and having those sort of clarity break times is really important.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And what's the name of that again? A clarity break?
Clarity break, yeah.
Oh man, how'd you come across that? Like, did someone introduce that to you, or?
Yeah, there's a sort of like a process for organizations called the Entrepreneurial Operating System,
Okay.
EOS. I know, like uh, talking to Annie Grindell, Y Disciple, that they're using EOS in their team, and I think it's kind of growing in the church space as well. It just kind of helps people set quarterly goals. I think back to how many years in ministry I set annual goals, but setting them every 3 months kind of helps you actually chunk. Are we working toward that or not?
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
it's valuable.
It's breaking down the journey for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So, what are you currently reading, watching, or listening to that you feel like everyone else should experience? And then it doesn't have to be church stuff; it can be personal. But like, yeah, what's got your attention?
Well, we are 39 weeks pregnant, so there's a lot of midwife reading and pregnancy and newborn prep. But I'm not sure everyone has to experience that or go back to it. In your case, Chris,
Yeah, I'm not in that
um,
season of life right now, but yeah, go ahead.
yeah, two things that stand out to me. One of my favorite spiritual writers is Henry Nouwen.
Mm,
I get a little email of the day that the Henry Nouwen Society sends out, which I find so fruitful from his writings. If you haven't read anything by him, I recommend Life of the Beloved.
mm.
It's just so grounding, especially in the season of Lent. And then I really love the Praise You Go app from I
Okay.
believe it's the Irish Jesuits. It's like a free app that just has like a daily examine on the readings of the day.
Wow.
One, great accents. Two, beautiful liturgical music from across the world, and three, just like a daily touch in on the readings, because my mornings start in the 6 o'clock hour with a 2-year-old. They're going to start with a newborn before that, probably here soon. So for me to be able to have an earbud in at some point in the morning and or put it on speaker and just have 10 minutes of that being guided through
Mm.
is a game changer for me as a dad.
That's awesome. That's awesome for sure. And hey, you gotta be hands free when you have a newborn for sure. So,
Totally.
all right, what's the worst ministry or leadership advice you've ever gotten from someone for the work that you do or the work that you were previously doing?
A bit cliche, but just that, oh, we've already done that. We
Mm,
tried that, it didn't work.
okay. Yeah, it's easy how we kind of default to that so often, for sure. All right, if you had one message for someone new to ministry, starting out in the field, what would it be?
Pay attention to the culture of your ministry and the culture of your team,
Mm,
the culture of your leadership. I think that's such a sneaky value add
hmm
or value drain in a team, uh, and things that contribute to that culture. Be an advocate to build them. Right. Ask for regular feedback and accountability. If you aren't getting it, seek it out yourself.
mm.
Set clear goals, right, quarterly or certainly annually, and assess your goals. Ask to be held accountable. Create a culture where you're growing together.
Awesome, awesome. And then last but not least, what's your biggest hope for the church at this time?
Maybe it's because I'm in DC, Chris, but I would say my biggest hope is that in a miracle, we can separate ourselves a bit from just the rampant polarization of American politics.
Mm,
Uh, St. Mother Teresa has that great quote that if we have no peace, it's because we've forgotten that we belong to one another.
mm.
And I feel like we're really forgetful right now in this season.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true that we have to remember what unites us is not, a party affiliation or a sports team or a cultural thing, but it's really our faith. It's Christ that unites us. And
Yeah, and, to be in the world but not of the world,
right.
right? I think when it comes to that, people really have a lot of animus
Mm,
for brother and sister Catholics.
yeah.
And I think it's okay to disagree, but I don't observe as much charity in that, whether it's through news articles or blogs, or certainly social media is not a warm place for unity.
Hmm.
But I think it's going to be a good self check for each of us to not see people as other,
Yeah.
right? Anytime we say, well, I don't like that person, to ask the question, do I know that person? Have I spoken with that person?
Right.
Right. And to see and to realize, remember to remind ourselves that that we're brothers and sisters. We belong to each other.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Awesome, Jonathan. Well, if people want to find you or learn more about Catholic Faith Technologies, where can they go to learn more?
Yeah, you can visit us at catholicfaithtech.com. And people can email me at jlewis@catholicfaithtech.com. Be grateful to be in touch.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we'll put those in the show notes for sure. Jonathan, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. We're only a couple miles away from each other. We'll have to grab a lunch again at that diner place in Catonsville, I think it was. But anyway,
Yeah, that was great.
always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. And we'll definitely catch up soon again.
Okay.
This has been a production of Marathon Youth Ministry, the church podcast talking all things ministry, produced by Stephen Herrera and Be Well Creative. Music provided by Loco Joseph. No animals were hurt in the production of this podcast. Please be sure to tip your waiters. See you next time.